The summer I turned 16, my world tilted on its axis, and I've never quite found my balance since. My name's Jake Harper, and I grew up in Willow Creek, a sleepy little town in upstate New York where the houses sagged under the weight of their own history, and the oak trees whispered secrets in the breeze. Our street, Maple Lane, was a postcard of small-town life. White picket fences, kids on bikes, and neighbors who knew your business better than you did. My family's modest two-story sat right next to a house that didn't belong. It was too big, too modern, too perfect. The kind of place that screamed money in a town that barely whispered it. The house belonged to Daniel Whitaker, a man who carried wealth like a shield. He was in his late 30s, tall and lean, with eyes that never seemed to settle on anything for long. He lived there with his wife Emily and their 4-year-old daughter Lily. Daniel was a mystery wrapped in silence. He didn't wave, didn't chat, didn't do anything to blend into Willow Creek's rhythm but his obsession with his car. That was loud enough for everyone to notice. It was a midnight blue Mustang, sleek and polished to a mirror shine. Every Saturday, without fail, he'd be out there wiping it down with a cloth, his movements deliberate, almost reverent. I'd watch from my bedroom window, my stomach twisting with a mix of curiosity and unease. Why would a man spend hours on a car when his wife and daughter were right there waiting for him? Emily was everything Daniel wasn't. She was warm, like a summer afternoon with a smile that could melt the frost off anyone's heart. At 32, she had a quiet grace about her, her auburn hair always pulled back in a loose ponytail. She'd stop by our porch sometimes, Lily trailing behind her, clutching a stuffed bunny. "How's school, Jake?" she'd ask, her voice soft but genuine. I'd mumble something about algebra or soccer, and she'd laugh, offering me a cookie from a Tupperware container. Lily was a burst of sunlight, all giggles and messy pigtails, chasing butterflies in their yard. Seeing them together felt like a promise that the world could still be good. But promises break, and in Willow Creek they shattered quietly. It was late August, the air thick with the scent of cut grass, when Emily and Lily vanished. One day they were there, waving as they walked to the park. The next, they were gone. My mom, Karen, was in the kitchen when the police knocked. I hovered by the stairs, my heart thudding as I caught snippets of their questions. "When did you last see Emily Whitaker? Did you notice anything unusual?" Daniel had reported them missing, claiming Emily had packed a bag, taken Lily, and left him. No note, no warning, just gone. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. Emily leaving? It didn't add up. She'd never seemed unhappy, never hinted at running away. Lily's laughter still echoed in my head, and the thought of her being whisked away, or worse, made my chest tighten. My parents were just as shaken. Dad, a gruff mechanic who rarely showed emotion, kept muttering, "Something's off." Mom's eyes were red for days, her hands trembling as she poured coffee. Willow Creek buzzed with rumors, each one uglier than the last. Some said Emily had a lover in another town that she'd fled to start over. Others whispered darker things that made my skin crawl. "Daniel's got secrets," old Mrs. Delaney said at the diner, her voice low. "That car of his? He loves it more than his own family." I tried to ignore the gossip, but every time I saw Daniel outside polishing that damn Mustang, my stomach churned. His movements were mechanical now, his face blank, like he was trying to erase something only he could see. Weeks turned into months, and the town's whispers grew louder, more desperate. I couldn't sleep. My dreams haunted by Emily's smile and Lily's giggle twisted into screams. One evening in October, Dad called me to the garage, his voice tight. "Jake, come look at this." I followed him, my sneakers scuffing the gravel, and froze when I saw it. Daniel's garage door was cracked open, just enough to reveal Emily's silver SUV inside. It was coated in dust, untouched, like a ghost left behind. My breath caught in my throat. If Emily had run away, why was her car still here? Mom joined us, her face paling as she stared. "That's not right," she whispered. We stood there, the three of us, caught in a silent agreement that something was horribly wrong. A few days later, the SUV was gone. Daniel never mentioned it, but we heard he'd sold it to a dealer in the next county. His behavior shifted after that. He stopped going out as much, his curtains always drawn. When I did catch sight of him, he looked haunted, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. The Mustang, once his pride and joy, sat in the driveway gathering dirt. The real nightmare came one November night. We were eating dinner, meatloaf, Mom's specialty, when a crash echoed from next door, sharp and jarring. My fork clattered to the plate, my heart racing. Dad grabbed a flashlight, his jaw set. "Stay here," he told us, but I crept to the window, my palms sweaty. I watched him cross the yard, his silhouette stark against the moonlight. He knocked on Daniel's door, the sound swallowed by the night. It took forever for Daniel to answer. When he did, he looked like death itself, pale, gaunt, his shirt wrinkled. Dad asked if he was okay, and Daniel nodded, mumbling about dropping a pan. But when Dad came back, his face was ashen. He sat heavily at the table, his hands shaking. "There was a pot on the stove," he said, his voice low. "Some kind of liquid simmering. And a shotgun on the counter." Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I felt like I'd been dunked in ice water. A gun? A pot of liquid? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. What was Daniel doing? What had he done? After that, Daniel became a ghost. He barely left the house, and when he did, he moved like a man carrying a weight no one could see. The town's rumors turned vicious. He killed them, kids at school whispered. Buried them somewhere. There was no proof, no bodies, no arrests. Just suspicion, thick and suffocating, wrapping around Willow Creek like fog. Round Willow Creek like fog. I started having nightmares. Emily's face pale and pleading, Lily crying in the dark. I'd wake up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat. The thought that something awful had happened next door, just feet from where I slept, clawed at me. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd missed something, some clue that could have saved them. Years passed. I'm 22 now, living in Albany, working as a barista while I figure out what's next. Willow Creek is a memory I try to bury, but it creeps back when I least expect it. I drive past old houses sometimes and catch myself looking for a dusty SUV in the garage. I think about Emily and Lily, their faces frozen in my mind. Emily's kind eyes, Lily's bunny tucked under her arm. Did they escape? Are they out there, safe, starting over? Or did something darker swallow them whole? Late at night, when the city hums outside my window, I feel that same chill from Maple Lane. It's the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, that whispers of truths you'll never know. I picture Daniel alone with his Mustang, polishing it to hide the stains only he could see. I don't know what happened to Emily and Lily, and maybe I never will. But I pray they're out there, far from Willow Creek, far from the man who loved his car more than his family. Because the alternative, the thought of what might have been simmering in that pot, what that shotgun was meant for, is too much to bear. I've always been a night owl, but there's a difference between staying up late with a book and driving through a city that feels like it's holding its breath. My name's Mia Torres, and at 24 I was scraping by as a food delivery driver in Chicago. It wasn't glamorous. Greasy bags, cranky customers, and a GPS that lied half the time. But it paid the bills. Most nights were predictable. Pick up, drop off, repeat. But one night last fall, predictable went out the window, and I'm still trying to piece together what happened. It was past midnight, the kind of hour where the streets feel too quiet, like the world's waiting for something to go wrong. My phone pinged with a new order from a diner on the edge of town. The address was unfamiliar, tucked in a part of Chicago I'd never driven through. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button. I was tired, my eyes gritty from 12 hours on the road. But rent was due and tips were my lifeline. I accepted, plugged the address into my GPS, and pulled out of the diner's lot, a bag of burgers and fries steaming on the passenger seat. The city lights faded as I drove, skyscrapers giving way to warehouses and empty lots. The GPS led me off the main roads onto streets that twisted like veins through a body I didn't recognize. The houses here were spread out, old and crumbling, their windows dark like hollow eyes. Street lights were scarce, casting pools of yellow that barely touched the shadows. My Honda's headlights carved a path through the dark, but it felt like the night was pushing back, swallowing the light whole. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. Something felt wrong. The GPS kept recalculating, its robotic voice telling me to turn left, then right, then back again. "Make a U-turn," it droned, and I cursed under my breath. The streets didn't make sense. Alleys looped into dead ends, roads doubled back on themselves. My heart started to thud, a steady drumbeat of unease. I glanced at the bag of food, its grease stains spreading like a warning. Just deliver it and go, I told myself. But the deeper I drove, the more I felt like I was falling into a trap. After what felt like hours, the GPS chirped, "You have arrived." I slowed to a stop, my breath catching. The house at the end of the cul-de-sac was a nightmare made real. It was tall and narrow, its paint peeling like dead skin. The windows were boarded up or shattered, jagged glass glinting in the moonlight. The lawn was a jungle of weeds, tall enough to brush my thighs. No lights, no cars, no sign of life. It looked like a place people forgot or ran from. I sat there, engine idling, my pulse hammering in my ears. Every instinct screamed to leave, to mark the order undelivered and peel out. But I thought about the customer, maybe some college kid stuck in a creepy rental waiting for their food. I couldn't afford to lose the gig over a bad vibe. Swallowing hard, I grabbed the bag and stepped out. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and something sour like rot. My sneakers crunched on the gravel, the only sound in a silence that felt alive watching me. The porch creaked under my weight, the wood soft and splintered. The front door was ajar, a black slit that seemed to breathe. I raised a fist to knock, then froze. A chill slithered down my spine, sharp and electric. I felt it. Eyes on me, boring into my back. I spun around, scanning the street, but it was empty. Just shadows shifting in the corners of my vision. "Hello?" I called, my voice thin, trembling. No answer, just the echo of my own fear bouncing back. I pushed the door open, my hand shaking. The hallway beyond was pitch black, swallowing the light from my phone's flashlight. "Delivery!" I tried again, louder, but the darkness ate my words. Then I heard it. A rustle, faint but deliberate, like something dragging across the floor. My heart lurched. I turned, ready to bolt, and that's when I saw them. They stepped out of the shadows, silent as ghosts. 5, maybe 6 figures gliding across the street from between the houses. My breath caught, my body frozen as they closed in. The first one reached the porch, and the moonlight hit their face, or where a face should have been. It was a mask, blank and white, smooth as porcelain, with no eyes, no mouth, just a void. The others wore the same, their heads tilted like predators sizing up prey. My knees buckled, terror clawing at my chest. I wanted to scream, but my throat was a vice trapping the sound. They surrounded me, their presence suffocating, pressing against my skin. I backed up, my shoulder hitting the porch railing. The bag of food slipped from my hand, hitting the ground with a soft thud. One of them reached for me, their fingers brushing my arm. Cold, impossibly cold, like ice through my jacket. I flinched, my mind screaming, "Run, run, run," but there was nowhere to go. They were everywhere, their masks gleaming in the dark, their silence louder than any threat. The one who touched me grabbed my wrist, their grip iron tight. I thrashed, my sneakers slipping on the porch, but they were stronger, pulling me toward the open door. "No!" I choked out, my voice breaking free at last. I kicked, clawed, anything to break loose, but another set of hands seized my other arm. They dragged me inside, the door slamming shut behind us, plunging me into blackness. I couldn't see, couldn't think. My senses scrambled, picking up fragments, the creak of floorboards, the rustle of their clothes, their hands searching my pockets. They took my phone, my keys, my wallet, their movements precise, mechanical. I heard my own ragged breathing, felt my heart slamming against my ribs. The darkness was a living thing wrapping around me, squeezing until I couldn't breathe. I wanted to beg, to plead, but what do you say to faceless monsters? Then as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Their hands released me and I collapsed, my knees hitting the floor. Footsteps retreated, soft but purposeful. The door creaked open, then closed, and they were gone. I was alone, trembling in the dark, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. What the hell had just happened? Who were they? Why me? I don't know how long I stayed there, curled on the floor, too scared to move. My body ached, my thoughts tangled in a loop of panic. Eventually, I forced myself to stand, my legs wobbly as a newborn colt. I fumbled for the door, half expecting it to be locked, but it gave way, spilling me into the night. The street was empty, my car still parked where I'd left it, untouched. The masks, the hands, the darkness, it was like they'd never been there. But my pockets were empty and my heart was a bruise, proof it wasn't a dream. I stumbled to my car, locked the doors, and floored it. The streets twisted around me, mocking me with their loops and dead ends, but I didn't care. I just drove, tears burning my eyes, until I hit the main road. The city lights felt like salvation, but they couldn't erase the chill in my bones. I kept seeing those masks, blank and merciless, waiting in the shadows of my mind. I didn't tell anyone, not at first. How do you explain something that sounds like a fever dream? But I quit the delivery job the next day. I couldn't face another night, another address leading me into the unknown. I'm 25 now, working at a bookstore, safe behind a counter where the worst thing is a grumpy customer. But I don't drive at night anymore. I can't, because somewhere out there in the maze of Chicago's forgotten streets, those masks are waiting. And I'm terrified they'll find me again. Hospitals have a way of feeling alive at night, like they're breathing secrets through their sterile walls. I was 22, fresh out of community college and working the graveyard shift as an orderly at St. Mary's Medical Center in Pittsburgh. My name's Lucas Bennett, and I'd taken the job because it paid better than flipping burgers, but I hadn't signed up for the kind of chill that sinks into your bones and stays there. The night everything changed, I learned that some shadows don't fade when the lights come on. St. Mary's was a beast of a building, sprawling, old, with corridors that seemed to stretch forever. During the day it hummed with purpose. Doctors barking orders, patients shuffling to appointments, machines beeping like a chorus. But after midnight it turned into something else. The halls went quiet, the fluorescent lights buzzed like dying insects, and every sound echoed like it was chasing itself. I spent most of my shifts in the basement, a maze of storage rooms, laundry chutes, and the morgue, a place I tried not to think about too much. That night I was holed up in the break room, a cramped space next to the morgue with peeling linoleum and a coffee machine that spat out sludge. My co-worker, Sarah Nguyen, was there too. She was 25, sharp-witted, with a laugh that could cut through the gloom. We'd been friends since orientation, bonding over bad hospital food and a shared hatred of paperwork. It was around 1 a.m. and we were killing time, swapping stories about high school pranks and debating whether the cafeteria's meatloaf was actually meat. The air was thick with the scent of bleach, the kind that clings to your clothes and makes your eyes sting. Outside, a storm was brewing, the wind rattling the basement windows like it wanted in. I was halfway through a story about sneaking into a football game when I heard it, footsteps slow and deliberate coming down the hall. Not the hurried clip of a nurse or the shuffle of a janitor, but something heavier, like someone was measuring each step. Sarah's eyes flicked to the doorway, her smile fading. I froze, my coffee mug warm against my palms, and listened. The steps stopped just outside, and for a moment there was nothing but the hum of the lights and the pounding of my own heart. A man appeared in the doorway, and my stomach twisted. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with a gaunt face and eyes that looked like they hadn't seen sleep in years. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his dark coat hung off him like it belonged to someone bigger. He didn't move, just stood there staring at us. There was something off about him, something that made the air feel tighter, like he'd brought the storm inside with him. His gaze darted between me and Sarah, quick and sharp, like a fox sizing up a trap. "Hey," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. "Can we help you?" He didn't answer right away. His lips twitched, not quite a smile, and I felt a prickle of unease crawl up my neck. Sarah shifted in her chair, her fingers tightening around her phone. The man took a step forward, his boots scuffing the floor, and I caught a whiff of something sour like old sweat and cigarette smoke. "Do you have access to the morgue?" he asked, his voice low and raspy, like he'd scraped it out of his throat. My heart skipped. The morgue? At this hour? I glanced at Sarah, her eyes wide but steady, and tried to keep my face neutral. "Yeah," I said cautiously. "Why?" Most people asking about the morgue were funeral home staff picking up bodies for services. But those visits were scheduled, usually during the day, and the drivers didn't look like they'd just crawled out of a nightmare. This guy was different. He didn't have a clipboard, no ID badge, no air of routine. Just those eyes, boring into me like he could see my thoughts. He didn't answer my question. Instead, he leaned forward, his hands stuffed deep in his coat pockets, and said something that turned my blood to ice. "I'll pay you. $500. Just let me in for an hour. I need to be alone with them." The words hung in the air, heavy and wrong, like a note played out of tune. My stomach churned, a wave of nausea rising fast. Alone with them? The bodies? I pictured the morgue's steel tables, the drawers lined with shrouded shapes, and my mind recoiled. What kind of person asks for that? Sarah's chair scraped as she stood, her face pale but her voice steady. "That's not happening," she said. "Hospital policy. You need to leave." The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed, a glint of something dark flickering in them. Anger, desperation. I couldn't tell, but it made my skin crawl. He stood there, silent, his jaw twitching like he was chewing on words he wouldn't let out. I pushed my chair back, my legs shaky, ready to bolt if he made a move. The break room felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the bleach smell choking me. Finally, he spoke again, his voice softer but no less unsettling. "You don't understand. I need to be there." He reached into his coat and I tensed, my hand gripping the edge of the table. But he pulled out a wad of cash, crumpled 20s and 50s, and held it up like a bribe. "No one has to know." My heart was hammering so loud I thought he'd hear it. Sarah stepped closer to me, her shoulder brushing mine, a silent signal we were in this together. "Get out," I said, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "Now." For a moment I thought he'd push it. His hand tightened around the cash, his lips parting like he was about to argue. But then something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of defeat maybe, or calculation. He shoved the money back in his pocket, gave us one last look, and turned. His footsteps echoed down the hall slower than before, like he was reluctant to leave. Sarah and I didn't move until the sound faded, swallowed by the hospital's hum. "Holy shit," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling now that he was gone. She sank into her chair, her hands shaking as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I nodded, my mouth dry, my mind racing. Who was he? What did he want with the morgue? The thought of him alone with those bodies doing... what? It was too much, too twisted to wrap my head around. "We need to tell security," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Sarah agreed, and we grabbed our badges, practically sprinting to the elevator. The basement felt different now, the shadows longer, the air colder. Every creak of the pipes made me jump, my imagination conjuring that man lurking around every corner. I kept seeing his face, those hollow eyes, that not quite smile, like it was burned into my brain. The security office was on the first floor, a small room crammed with monitors and a desk that looked older than the hospital. The guard on duty, Mike, was a burly guy in his 50s with a no-nonsense vibe. We spilled the story, tripping over each other's words, describing the man's coat, his voice, the cash. When we got to the part about the morgue, Mike's face changed. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, and I felt a fresh wave of dread. "Did he say he wanted to be alone with the bodies?" Mike asked, his voice tight. "Yeah," I said, my throat closing up. "Exactly that." Mike cursed under his breath, running a hand over his buzzed hair. "Son of a bitch, he's been here before." My stomach dropped. "What?" Mike leaned back, his chair creaking. "Last few months we've had reports, guy matching that description. Tall, pale, creepy as hell, showing up at odd hours, asking to get into the morgue. Never gives a name, never sticks around long enough for us to grab him. We've got him on a couple of cameras, but the footage is grainy, slippery bastard." Sarah's face went white. "You're saying he's done this before and you haven't caught him?" "We're trying," Mike said, frustration creeping into his tone. "He's careful, knows the blind spots, avoids the main entrances, but he's not violent far as we know, just persistent." Persistent. The word landed like a stone in my gut. I pictured him circling the hospital, waiting for a chance, for someone to say yes. What was he after? My mind spun with possibilities, none of them good. Necrophilia, some sick ritual, or something I couldn't even imagine. Each thought was a splinter, digging deeper, making my skin crawl. Mike promised to up the patrols, maybe get a sketch artist to work with us. He told us to stay alert, to call if we saw anything else. But as we rode the elevator back to the basement, the weight of it all settled on me. The hospital didn't feel safe anymore. It was like the walls were watching, hiding something I couldn't see. Sarah was quiet, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the floor. I wanted to say something, to crack a joke and break the tension, but the words wouldn't come. Back in the break room, we tried to act normal, but it was useless. Every noise, the hum of the fridge, the drip of the coffee maker, made my heart lurch. I kept glancing at the doorway, half expecting him to reappear, cash in hand, eyes gleaming. Sarah fiddled with her phone, her fingers restless. "You okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head. "Number you?" "Nope." I forced a smile, but it felt like a lie. We sat there, the silence between us heavy with shared fear. The storm outside was picking up, rain lashing the windows, thunder rumbling like a warning. I wondered if he was out there, standing in the downpour, watching the hospital, waiting. The rest of the shift dragged on, each minute a small eternity. I couldn't focus, my thoughts looping back to the man's voice, his offer. The way he'd looked at us like we were pieces in a game he was playing. When 7 a.m. finally rolled around, I grabbed my jacket and practically ran to the parking lot. The morning was gray, the air damp and cold, but it felt like freedom after the basement's claustrophobia. Sarah walked with me, her steps quick, her eyes scanning the lot like she expected him to jump out. "You think he'll come back?" she asked as we reached our cars. I didn't want to answer, didn't want to think about it, but the truth clawed its way out. "Yeah, guys like that don't stop." She nodded, her lips tight, and we parted ways. I drove home, the city waking up around me, oblivious to the shadow I'd met. My apartment was a mess, dishes in the sink, laundry on the floor, but it felt like a sanctuary. I locked the door, checked it twice, and collapsed on the couch, too wired to sleep. His face kept flashing in my mind, those eyes like black holes pulling me in. I wondered what he'd wanted, what he'd planned to do in that cold, silent morgue. The possibilities were a nightmare I couldn't shake. I never saw him again, thank God. I stayed at St. Mary's for another month, but every shift was a tightrope walk, every shadow a threat. Eventually I quit, took a job stocking shelves at a grocery store, safer, saner, no morgues. But the memory of that night is a scar, raw and aching. I still hear his voice sometimes, late at night when the world's too quiet, offering cash for something no one should want. I still feel that chill, the one that says we brushed against something dark, something that could have swallowed us whole if we'd let it. I don't walk past the morgue anymore. Not that I'd want to. But I know it's there behind locked doors, holding secrets I'll never understand. And somewhere out there maybe he's still looking for a way in, still chasing whatever twisted need drives him. I just hope I'm never there when he finds it. When I was 15, I thought I knew what fear was. Stage fright before a school play, or the knot in my stomach when Mom caught me sneaking out. But real fear? The kind that claws at your soul and leaves you hollow? I didn't meet it until the night I went hunting with my dad in the Pine Barrens. My name's Ethan Carter, and I'm 21 now, living in Philly, trying to outrun a memory that stalks me like a shadow. Some things you can't unsee, and some sounds you can't unhear. That night in the pines is both, burned into me forever. It was October 2018, the air crisp with the promise of fall. Dad, Tom Carter, a bear of a man with calloused hands and a laugh like thunder, had been taking me hunting since I was old enough to hold a rifle. He was 42 then, a construction foreman who lived for the outdoors. The Pine Barrens, a sprawling wilderness in southern New Jersey, was his church. 1,000,000 acres of pine trees, sandy trails, and secrets older than the state itself. He'd tell me stories about it, ghost towns, lost hikers, even whispers of a winged creature called the Jersey Devil. I'd roll my eyes, chalking it up to campfire tales. At 15, I was too cool for myths, too eager to prove I could keep up with him. We set out just before dusk, our pickup rattling down a back road that felt like it led nowhere. I sat shotgun, my backpack stuffed with snacks and a water bottle. My rifle, a .22 Dad gave me for my birthday, propped between my knees. The sky was bruised purple, the sun sinking behind a wall of trees that seemed to lean in, watching us. Dad was quiet, focused, his hands steady on the wheel. I fiddled with the radio, static crackling, until I gave up. The deeper we drove, the heavier the air felt, thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. My stomach fluttered, not quite nerves, but something close. I told myself it was just the thrill of the hunt. We parked at a clearing near the forest's edge, the kind of place where the world feels like it's holding its breath. Dad slung his rifle over his shoulder, his boots crunching on the gravel as he checked his gear. "Stay close," he said, his voice low but warm. "Nights when the deer move, but it's easy to get turned around out here." I nodded, zipping my jacket against the chill. My flashlight cast a weak beam, barely denting the dark. The trees loomed taller now, their branches tangled like fingers ready to snatch us up. I shook off the thought, embarrassed by my own imagination. I wasn't a kid anymore. I could handle this. We trekked deeper, the forest swallowing us whole. The ground was soft, carpeted with leaves that muffled our steps. Dad moved like he belonged here, pausing to check tracks or listen for rustling. I tried to mimic him, but my legs felt heavy, my breath loud in my ears. The pines pressed closer, their trunks a maze that blocked out the stars. My flashlight flickered, and I cursed under my breath, smacking it against my palm. Dad glanced back, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Relax, Ethan. It's just you, me, and the woods." But it wasn't. I felt it, an itch at the back of my neck like eyes boring into me. I scanned the trees, my beam catching nothing but bark and shadows. The forest was too quiet. No owls, no crickets, just a stillness that made my skin prickle. We'd been walking for an hour, maybe more, when Dad stopped, crouching to inspect a patch of dirt. "Deer sign," he whispered, pointing at a faint hoof print. I nodded, my grip tightening on my rifle, but my heart wasn't in it. The dark was thicker now, pressing against me, whispering things I couldn't quite hear. "Let's rest," Dad said, noticing the sweat on my brow. We found a clearing with a fallen log, its moss damp under my hands as I sat. The air was cold, biting through my jacket, and I pulled my knees up, trying to shake the unease that clung like fog. Dad leaned against a tree, his rifle across his lap, his eyes scanning the dark. "Patience is the game," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Wait for the right moment." I tried to listen, but my ears were tuned to the forest, straining for any sound. My heartbeat was a drum, steady but too loud. I sipped my water, the plastic crinkling, and that's when it happened. A sound that stopped my breath. A growl, low and guttural, rolling through the trees like a storm cloud. Not a dog, not a bear, but something wrong, something that didn't belong in this world. My head snapped up, my eyes wide, searching the dark. Dad froze, his hand tightening on his rifle, his face pale in the moonlight. "Ethan," he whispered, barely audible. "Don't move." The growl came again, closer, vibrating in my chest. My hands shook, the rifle slippery in my palms. I wanted to ask what it was, to hear Dad say it was just a coyote, but his eyes told me he didn't know either. They were wide, not with the calm focus of a hunter, but with something I'd never seen in him: fear. The air turned heavy, thick with the smell of wet fur and something metallic like blood. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. Whatever was out there, it was watching us. Then I saw it. A shape emerged from the shadows, tall and hunched, moving with a grace that made my skin crawl. It was bigger than any animal I'd ever seen, 7, maybe 8 feet, its body lean but powerful, like a wolf stretched to a nightmare's size. Its eyes glowed, not yellow but a sickly green, piercing the dark like lanterns. Teeth glinted in its maw, long and sharp, dripping with something I didn't want to name. It wasn't a wolf, wasn't a bear, wasn't anything I could pin a name to. It was other, a thing that shouldn't exist, and it was staring right at me. My heart slammed against my ribs, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Dad raised his rifle, slow and deliberate, but his hands trembled. The creature growled again, louder, a sound that shook the ground and tore through my skull. It circled us, its claws scraping the earth, each step deliberate, like it was toying with us. I clutched my rifle, my finger hovering over the trigger, but I couldn't move. Fear had me in a chokehold, squeezing until I saw spots. I wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from this nightmare, but I was rooted, trapped in those glowing eyes. "Stay still," Dad hissed, his voice cracking. But the creature didn't care. It lunged closer, its breath hot and foul, visible in the cold air. I saw its muscles ripple, its fur matted with something dark, mud, or worse. My mind screamed, "Shoot, shoot, shoot," but Dad didn't fire and neither did I. It was like we both knew a bullet wouldn't stop this thing. It was beyond us, beyond the rules of the world we thought we knew. Then it howled, a sound so raw, so primal it felt like the forest itself was screaming. The trees shuddered, leaves falling like rain, and my ears rang with the echo. Dad grabbed my arm, yanking me to my feet. "Run!" he shouted, and I didn't think, didn't argue. I ran, my legs pumping, my rifle bouncing against my chest. The forest blurred around me, branches clawing at my face, tearing my skin. Dad was behind me, his breath ragged, his boots pounding the earth. The creature's growls followed, close, too close, a predator's promise that we couldn't outrun it. We crashed through the underbrush, thorns snagging my jacket, my lungs burning. The path was gone, the trees a labyrinth with no exit. My flashlight fell, its beam spinning wildly before winking out. Darkness swallowed us, broken only by the creature's eyes flashing in the distance, tracking us. I tripped, my knee slamming into a root, pain shooting through me. Dad hauled me up, his grip bruising, his face a mask of terror. "Keep going," he yelled, but his voice was drowned by another howl, louder, hungrier. I don't know how long we ran. Minutes? Hours? Time lost meaning, stretched thin by panic. My legs screamed, my chest heaved, but stopping wasn't an option. The growls faded, then surged again like the creature was playing with us, letting us think we'd escaped before closing the gap. My mind was a mess, flashing with images, those teeth, those eyes, Dad's fear. I'd never seen him scared, not when he lost his job, not when Mom left. But this broke him, and that broke me. Finally we stopped, collapsing against a tree, gasping for air. My shirt was soaked with sweat, my face stinging from scratches. Dad leaned over, hands on his knees, his rifle still clutched like a lifeline. The forest was silent again, no growls, no footsteps, just our ragged breathing. I wanted to cry, to scream, to ask what the hell that was, but I couldn't find my voice. Dad's eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw him as mortal, not the invincible hero I'd built him up to be. "We need to move," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Find the truck." I nodded, too numb to argue. We stumbled on, the dark, relentless, every shadow a threat. My flashlight was gone, but Dad's held steady, its beam a fragile shield. The forest felt alive, watching, waiting for us to slip. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent my heart racing. I kept glancing back, expecting those eyes to flare up, expecting claws to tear through the night. But there was nothing, just silence heavier than the growls had been. Hours later we found it, a narrow trail, overgrown but familiar. Relief hit me like a drug, loosening the knot in my chest. We followed it, half running, half staggering, until the clearing came into view. The truck sat there untouched, a beacon in the dark. I nearly sobbed, my legs giving out as I reached the door. Dad fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking, and we piled in, slamming the doors like we could lock out the night. He floored it, the engine roaring as we tore down the road. The pines blurred past, their branches scraping the truck like fingers begging us to stay. I pressed my forehead against the window, my breath fogging the glass, and watched the forest fade. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? We'd seen something impossible, something that didn't fit in the world of deer tracks and campfires. My hands trembled, my rifle still across my lap, useless against whatever that was. Back home, we sat in the driveway, the engine ticking as it cooled. Dad stared straight ahead, his knuckles white on the wheel. "Don't tell anyone," he said finally, his voice flat. "They won't believe us." I nodded, but the words felt like a betrayal. How could we keep this quiet? How could we pretend it didn't happen? But I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of what we'd survived, and I didn't push. We never spoke of it again. Not to each other, not to Mom, not to anyone. Life went on, but it was different. I stopped hunting, gave my rifle back to Dad. The woods, once a place of adventure, were a nightmare I couldn't revisit. I'm 21 now, studying engineering, living in a cramped apartment with roommates who blast music at 2 a.m. I try to focus on equations, on deadlines, on normal things, but sometimes when the city quiets down, I hear it. That growl, low and hungry, echoing in my skull. I see those eyes, green and endless, staring through me. I wonder what it was, where it came from, if it's still out there waiting in the pines. Dad's older now. His hair graying, but he doesn't talk about it either. I catch him staring out windows sometimes, like he's looking for something he hopes he'll never find. The pine barrens are still there, a dark stain on the map I avoid. I don't know if it was the Jersey Devil, a mutant, or something worse. Something that doesn't have a name. All I know is we escaped, but not whole. Part of me is still running through those woods, chased by a beast that knows my scent. And deep down, I'm terrified it'll find me again. Because some things don't let you go. They just wait. There's a certain rhythm to working the night shift. Long stretches of quiet broken by bursts of chaos that remind you the world never really sleeps. My name's Caleb Reed, and at 23 I was manning the counter at a gas station on the outskirts of Tulsa, Oklahoma. It wasn't my dream job. Hell, it wasn't even my plan, but it kept the lights on while I figured out what came next. The station, a rundown shell with flickering neon signs, sat like a lone beacon on a road that felt forgotten after dark. Most nights it was just me, the hum of the cooler, and a clock that seemed to mock my existence. But one night that rhythm broke, and I'm still piecing together who I became when it did. It was February, the kind of cold that sneaks under your skin and stays there. I'd been at it for a year, long enough to know the regulars, truckers grabbing coffee, teens sneaking beers, the occasional drifter looking for a bathroom. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and by 2:30 the place was a ghost town. The parking lot stretched out under sodium lights, casting long shadows that danced with the wind. Inside, the air smelled of stale popcorn and motor oil. The radio stuck on a country station that crackled more than it played. I was behind the counter, counting the cash drawer, my fingers numb from the chill seeping through the glass doors. My manager, Donna, always drilled it into me. "Be careful at night, Caleb. You never know who's out there." I'd nod, thinking she was paranoid. I mean, what's the worst that could happen in a place this dead? I was wrong. So wrong. The drawer was open, bills stacked neatly, ones, fives, a few 20s, when the front door slammed open with a force that rattled the windows. I jumped, my heart lurching into my throat, the cash fluttering in my hand. Before I could process it, a man stormed in. his boots pounding the linoleum. He was a mess, late 30s maybe, with wild eyes and a face carved by hard living. His jacket was torn, his hair matted, and he reeked of sweat and something sharper like desperation laced with chemicals. He didn't speak, didn't hesitate, just locked eyes on the money in my hand like it was the answer to every problem he'd ever had. Time slowed, the world narrowing to him, me and the cash. My brain screamed do something, but my body was a statue rooted behind the counter. He lunged faster than I expected, his hand snatching the bills from mine. The contact was electric, his skin rough, his grip frantic, and then he was gone, halfway to the door before I could blink. The cash, my responsibility, my job, vanished with him, stuffed into his jacket as he stumbled into the night. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking, raw with shock. Something snapped inside me. Not fear, not yet, but a surge of anger, hot and reckless. I wasn't going to let him walk away, not like that. Donna's warnings, the security camera blinking above, the sensible part of me yelling to stay put. They all drowned in the adrenaline flooding my veins. I vaulted the counter, my sneakers squeaking, and bolted after him, the cold air hitting me like a slap as I burst outside. The parking lot was a blur of shadows, the thief's silhouette weaving toward the road. He wasn't fast, his steps uneven, like his body was fighting itself. I could see the money poking from his pocket, a taunting flash of green against the dark. "Stop!" I yelled, my breath puffing in the frigid air. My legs burned, my heart a hammer against my ribs, but I was gaining. He glanced back, his eyes wide with panic, and stumbled, nearly falling. That's when I saw it, the glaze in his gaze, the way his movements didn't line up. Drugs, maybe. Or something worse. I don't know why I kept going. Common sense was a distant memory replaced by a stubborn need to make this right, to prove I wasn't just some kid who'd let a thief walk over him. The road stretched out, empty except for us, the gas station's lights fading behind me. He veered into a ditch, his boots slipping on the gravel, and I closed the gap, my hand brushing his jacket. "Give it back!" I shouted, my voice hoarse, desperate. He spun, swinging wildly, and I ducked, my pulse roaring. We grappled, a clumsy tangle of limbs, his breath sour in my face. I grabbed his arm, twisting until he yelped, but he broke free, shoving me hard. I hit the ground, pain spiking through my elbow, the gravel biting my palms. He was off again, slower now, his chest heaving. I scrambled up, my lungs screaming, and chased him, driven by something I didn't understand. Pride, maybe, or the fear of facing Donna empty-handed. My phone was in my pocket, heavy against my thigh, and I fumbled for it, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. "Robbery?" I panted when the operator answered, my eyes locked on the thief's back. "Shell Station, Highway 66. Guy stole cash. I'm following him." I gave what details I could, his jacket, his build, the direction he was heading, while keeping pace. The operator's voice was calm, telling me to stay safe, that cops were on the way, but safe wasn't an option anymore. I was in too deep, caught in the rush of the chase. He was slowing, his steps faltering, his head turning like he knew he was done. I kept my distance now, maybe 20 feet, close enough to see him, but far enough to dodge if he got wild again. The road curved past a strip of empty lots, the kind where broken bottles and weeds were the only tenants. My legs ached, my breath ragged, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. He was mine. Not out of vengeance, but because letting him go felt like admitting defeat. Then I heard it, the wail of sirens, faint but growing, slicing through the night like a lifeline. The thief heard it too. He froze, his shoulders tensing, his head whipping around. For a second our eyes met, and I saw it. Not just panic, but despair, raw and bottomless. He wasn't a monster, not some cartoon villain. He was a man, broken by something I'd never understand. My anger faltered, replaced by a pang I couldn't name. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, 2 squad cars screaming toward us. The thief's knees buckled, and he sank to the ground, his hands limp at his sides. Stopped, my chest heaving, watching as the cops pulled up, their doors slamming. "Hands up!" one shouted, his gun drawn, his partner circling to the side. The thief didn't fight. He raised his hands slowly, his head bowed, and let them cuff him. The cash spilled from his pocket, 20s fluttering like dead leaves. One of the cops, a stocky guy with a buzz cut, jogged over to me. "You the one who called?" he asked, his flashlight blinding me for a second. "Yeah," I said, my voice raw. "He took the money from the register." He nodded, scribbling in a notepad. "You did good calling us, but chasing him, that was dumb. Could have gotten ugly." I shrugged, my cheeks burning. He wasn't wrong, but I didn't regret it. Not then, not with the adrenaline still singing in my veins. They searched the thief, pulling out the cash, a lighter, a crumpled pack of smokes. "Name's Ronnie," the cop told me later, his tone softer. "Homeless. Been in and out of trouble. Looks like he's on something. Meth, probably. Desperate folks do desperate things." I watched them load Ronnie into the squad car, his head low, his wrists bound. Part of me wanted to hate him, to cling to the anger that had fueled the chase. But seeing him there, defeated, I felt something else. Pity, maybe, or guilt for feeling pity. He wasn't a mastermind, just a man who'd hit rock bottom and kept digging. I wondered what had brought him here, what choices or chances had led to this cold, empty road. The cops took my statement, their radios crackling as they wrapped up. "You're lucky," the second officer said, a woman with sharp eyes. "Could have gone south fast." I nodded, my hands still trembling, the reality of it sinking in. Lucky. Yeah, I was, but it didn't feel like a win. Back at the station, I sat behind the counter, the place unchanged but alien. The cash was gone, locked up as evidence, and I'd have to explain it to Donna. The clock ticked toward 6 a.m., but I wasn't counting minutes anymore. I was replaying the night, his eyes, my shouts, the gravel under my knees. My elbow throbbed, my palms stung, but it was the weight in my chest that hurt most. I'd caught him, done the right thing. But what had it cost? What had it fixed? When my shift ended, I locked up, my fingers clumsy on the keys. The parking lot was still, the shadows softer now, dawn creeping in like an apology. I drove home, Tulsa waking up around me, cars honking, coffee shops opening, life moving on. My apartment was a mess, but it was mine, a refuge from the night. I sank onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, Ronnie's face stuck in my mind. I wondered where he was. Jail, probably. Another mark on a rap sheet that told a story I'd never hear. I kept working at the station for a few more months, but it wasn't the same. Every creak of the door made my pulse jump, every stranger's glance a threat. I'd catch myself watching the lot, half expecting Ronnie to come back or someone like him. Eventually I quit, took a job at a warehouse, safer but duller. I'm 24 now, saving for a place of my own, trying to move forward. but that night is a splinter under my skin, sharp and persistent. I think about Ronnie sometimes, about the man he might have been before the drugs, before the streets. I wonder if he's still out there, still running, or if he's found some kind of peace. I don't hate him, not anymore. He took something from me, money, sure, but also a piece of the kid who thought he could handle anything. In return, he gave me a truth I wasn't ready for. The line between right and wrong isn't clean, and courage can leave you emptier than fear. Some nights when the world's too quiet, I hear those sirens again, see the cash fluttering in the dark. I feel the cold, the chase, the moment I chose to run instead of hide. I don't know if I'd do it again, if I'd chase him down or let him go. All I know is that night changed me, showed me the edges of who I am. And those edges, they're sharper than I ever imagined.